I'm artist Chad Leduc.
And I'm writer Johnny Cassidy. We're the co-creators of Sasquatch Klondike from Tardigrade Press, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's March 1st, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Johnny Cassidy and Chad Leduc about Sasquatch Klondike. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts, and it's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. He's the founder of the philanthropic sales comics altruism platform and has been a comic book enthusiast from birth. His first project is Sasquatch Klondike. Chad Leduc is an illustrator-creator from Brantford, Ontario. His diploma in interpretive illustration from Sheridan College. He runs an independent apparel line in addition to being a designer for a small publishing house. He recently illustrated the children's book The Girl from Glaucon's Glen. Sasquatch Klondike is described as a new thriller series presenting a different take on the Sasquatch mythos and aesthetic. It is 1 part historical fiction, 1 part social analysis, 2 parts lore and legend, and a splash of adrenaline-soaked mindless panic. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Johnny Cassidy and Chad Leduc about Sasquatch Klondike.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I appreciate your time.
And thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Super. What I normally do to start off the conversation is ask about your first comic book. So I normally ask you, what was the first comic book you read? So maybe I'll ask you that first.
Sure, yeah. I actually had to go back through my collection in order to answer this question, and I'm nearly positive that it was the Zellers giveaway. You remember Zellers? Yeah, Batman, Word to the Wise. And it was basically just a promotion of literacy. Basically, the way that he ended up beating the Joker in the long run was by being a good reader. So, yeah,
Classic.
That was my first, I think.
Neat. How about you, Chad? What was your first comic book?
It was one of those large edition ones, the one with Flash on the front. I'm actually looking at the image. I dug it up the other day because I said to Johnny, I just remember this really big comic with Captain Marvel on it. And it was the famous first edition. And they were like an oversized print. I think they were like 10 by 14.
Pretty cool.
There was a Wonder Woman one. And what was that group one that I was talking about there, Johnny?
Oh, I don't remember. Was it Justice League or Justice Society, maybe?
Yeah, the Crisis Earth one.
Oh, cool.
That one, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I've got one here is Superman versus Spider-Man. That was really cool, too. That crossover.
Interesting.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, those are all great books to start with. I'm wondering, though, however, who are your influences that inspire you today? And again, I'll ask Johnny for you to go first, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, 100%, and I'm sure that this is a very cookie-cutter response, but I got to say, Jeff Lemire, when I got back into collecting, he's the one that really showed me the tone that a comic book can take. And I was accustomed to, anything 90s and before, where superheroes, that's it. There's no kind of gravity or drama to it, at least not real-world type gravity and drama. But then you got your Brian K. Vaughns, you've got Marguerite Bennett is absolutely brilliant. The list goes on and on. Garth Ennis, people who are creating books now that are just a different take on either superheroes or just a different take on comics entirely.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. How about you, Chad? Who influences your work today?
I basically pull from all sorts of influences. Jack Kirby's obviously a big one for me, just being a prolific illustrator and influential in his ideas and the way he drew. Obviously, there's Jim Lee. There's other people like David Finch and some of the newer guys like Robert Marzullo and Jimmy Reyes, guys like that. Although I don't draw like them, they definitely have a lot of stuff to pull from, a lot of knowledge, and yeah, just interesting stuff.
Yeah, lots of good inspirations there, that's for sure. So we're here talking about your latest project, Sasquatch Klondike, which is an interesting title in itself. But I'm wondering if you could describe it, if someone were to come up to you in the street and say, hey, what's this book all about? Maybe you can talk about the origins of the project too.
So it's about a group of impoverished Canadian families who, at the beginning of the Klondike Gold Rush, are basically forced to do whatever they have to do to survive. And this is actually something that happened that came to me during the research for this project. That it was much like today, where economic hardships were rampant. So these families are forced to go to the Klondike in search of gold, and in the process, because at that time not everything had been mapped out, so there's that whole fear aspect of everything not being clear cut, like this is a train that's going to get us to the Klondike. It didn't work like that. So what happens when you come across these potentially violent beasts on your way in unmapped territories?
So, Chad, it's definitely an interesting time period, different from what we have today. How did you do your research to come up with the reality of that particular story?
My research is just done from experience. I've had lots of experiences in the woods and have been part of the Sasquatch community for many years. It was just an idea that ended up striking me one day. And I knew I wanted to create a comic, and I figured, taking from some of the best people like writers and creators and that, they're always talking about draw and pull from inspirations and things that inspire you and things that you're knowledgeable about. And this seems to be one of the topics that I have a considerable amount of knowledge about, and just learning about it. And I pitched the idea to Johnny about at first it was Sasquatch Wars, and I had an illustration that I created just to kind of give him an idea, but it was based on different timelines and focusing on the gold rush or in that sense, like the late 1800s and stuff. And then Johnny took it from there.
Yeah, we sort of had an interesting dynamic there because I knew next to nothing about Sasquatch lore and legends and all that stuff. So the research that I was able to put into it was from a completely fresh set of eyes. So that's where our dynamic really came into play.
Cool. Now, I know that I'm not a expert by any means, but I know in various parts of North America, Sasquatch goes by different names. Is there a different name in Canada for Sasquatch, or is that the typical one?
Yeah, there's a bunch of, sorry, Johnny, I'm kind of fielding this one.
Oh, no, this is definitely yours.
Yeah, it's different indigenous cultures or First Nations have different names for them as well. And we actually have a shirt that I produced with Sasquatch names of the world. You obviously have like the Yarn and the Yeti and things like that, right? So Bigfoot, you get into the like Almasty and other such names based on geographical regions and that. I'm not sure the exact names on the shirt. There's quite a few. It depends on the culture, the region, but it seems like everybody in North America, whoever lived in certain regions and environments had names for them. So
sure. Well, this will date myself. You're too young for this, but I remember growing up. $6 Million Man Show had the Bigfoot appearing in various episodes, and this was fantastic seeing this guy who you'd hear only in legends show up.
Which in hindsight looks horrible on screen, by the way.
But back in the day, that was a pretty cool thing. But no, I get the fact that it definitely, that legend has been around for eons, and putting it in this particular time period is quite unique, not something that you typically expect. So why did you pick the Klondike? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, this one's Chad again.
I was thinking about the origin stories, like Johnny was saying, when humans are confronting the wildest of nature and confronting obviously their hidden fears and all that other stuff, and confronting situations and environments. I knew that it would be the kind of environment that would definitely suit a good storyline. Mine's all based on a generalized outline, right? I had a general idea, illustration, and once again, Johnny just took it to the next level by, writing a great story and creating some fantastic characters to go along with it.
Cool. Good. So I'm wondering, had you two work together, or how did you meet up to develop this project?
Oh, actually, I'm going to take this one because we haven't brought this up yet, but we had worked together before because I used to be in a band, and this is way back. So Chad and I share a friend circle. And so I was in this band. I had seen Chad's work, and I guess this would have been through his brother probably. And I'd seen some of his paintings, and we were working on an album, and I immediately said, we need to get that guy to do our album art. And so that was basically, I guess, the beginning. And then we're looking at 17 years later, and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. That was, around 2003.
Very good. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe the next question would be about your creative process. How do you work together as writer and artist? How do you collaborate? Maybe you could walk me through how you created this book.
Sure. Yeah, we're still kind of figuring that out, actually. Like, issue number 2 has shown a lot more hurdles to us, because something about issue number 1, it just flowed, and everything that I had to put down on the page was basically like we could just put it down. Chad was able to sketch it out. I had to change a couple things in the script, but it was just this perfect phenomenon where there wasn't a lot of back and forth other than like the minutia of things. But now we're starting to figure out that as I write more, and so I have to really edit it down and stuff, and I have to remove certain sections and so on. So it's really just a back and forth. Chad can field more of that though and explain his end of things.
There was definitely some challenges presented, when you're looking at a story from two different angles, and from a writer's angle compared to like an illustrator's angle. I was mentioning to my wife that sometimes a writer sees the world in like a 3-dimensional way, and you're trying to put something into a 2-dimensional form on a flat piece of paper into a small panel, that sometimes you have to just take a little bit of, you have to spin it a little bit in order to make the things work. And that was part of the challenge too, was taking the script and making it work. But Johnny also created a fantastic panel layout and outline as well as to characters and so on and so forth. He broke it down really well, which was good. I obviously put some of my own spins on it, and in the second issue, it's definitely adapted and changed a little bit with how the panel and structure of the panels are. So
is there a complete outline for the story that you want to tell, or are you seeing that as you're going through it, some of it is actually reflective of that sort of collaboration, the changes that must take place for the story to exist?
Well, I know that for me, the 6-issue arc that we had initially intended contained far too much stuff. So luckily I hadn't spent hours and hours working on all of the outlines for every single issue. It's best to go one at a time, because this second issue doesn't contain all the stuff that I needed it to. So therefore it's going to have to move forward into the next one. So it is best to evolve based on artistic limitations and space limitations within a given book. Does that sound right, Chad?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. There's definitely some things that have had to adapt and change for sure, right? So, but the outline and everything laid out was really well, especially in the first one. The second one, we're definitely making some changes for sure. So, sorry, my dog's going ballistic here.
I hope it's not the Sasquatch. We'd be in trouble.
Yeah, I got him trapped in the basement right now.
Oh no, sorry. So you definitely got. It sounds like issue 2 is in the works, and there'll be more down the road. Can you talk about where people can find out more about the book, and where to buy it, perhaps too?
Yeah, I'll field that one. Definitely the top priority right now, because there's only, as of the recording of this, there's only 12 days left in our Kickstarter campaign. So if the listener was to go to Kickstarter and just search Sasquatch, ours is at the top of the list, luckily. So that's the number 1 spot, because that's only 12 days left. After that, Chad can bring you into the fact that we now have a small business. But after that, we have a website that we're building called tardigradepress.ca. So that'll be available very soon.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, because you want people to be able to find it easily, especially after the Kickstarter is complete. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that you're both very busy on this project, but I'm wondering if there are any other projects that you have that you want to consider after this or in parallel with it?
Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, it just was one of these ideas that came out of the woodwork, right? I was saying to Johnny that it'd probably be good if we were doing this kind of stuff that we should just focus on starting up our own publication to launch the comic. And then there came other ideas of possibly bringing in other creator teams to to have on our actual Tardigrade Press label as well. And it just seemed interesting too, because we had lots of ideas, and there's lots of things rolling around in the background as to, different projects, different timelines, different incarnations of Sasquatch in particular. And those are some exciting projects, and it would just be nice to work with other creators as well.
We do have one that's actually lined up, and they're currently working on their title. It's called Fatal Charades, and it's one of those high fantasy books, which is very different from what we produce. But it's by writer Daryl Sawatsky and artist Bob Little, and they probably wouldn't appreciate me talking about it this early in the creative process.
Sure.
But I've read their outlines and everything, and it is expansive. So they know what they're doing, and it's going to be quite epic when it's finally done.
That's great. That's great.
Yep.
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit more about where people can find you online, and certainly for your future projects, your websites and social media.
Aside from the Kickstarter campaign, just in case somebody's listening in replay and it's already done, we've got tardigradepress.ca. It's spelled exactly as it sounds, no spaces or dashes. And then we've got Linktree, that's linktr.ee/Sasquatch Comic. And that's currently where all of our links for all of our social media, including the Tardigrade Press stuff, is. Eventually that'll switch over so that Tardigrade Press kind of takes that title, and then Sasquatch Comic becomes sort of like under the umbrella rather than the top of the umbrella. Yeah, and that link tree basically sums everything up.
Cool. And how about your social media? Where can people find you through the various social media apps?
Oh, that's all there. Although Chad does have one that I don't think is on our link tree. He might want to talk about the illustration Facebook page.
I just signed up for a graphic artist guild, and it's just a guild for graphic artists, illustrators, designers, cartoonists, and such. I just signed up for their site, so it'll allow me to use their platform as a launch as well. Also to bring in attention for our publication as well, and also for possible representation as well, which might be something that could definitely benefit us as writer and illustrator teams. So I think it'd be beneficial.
Thanks to Johnny and Chad for the chat. You can discover more about Sasquatch Klondike on Twitter at Sasquatch Comic, and on Kickstarter too. You can discover more about Johnny on Twitter at TheJohnnyCassi and the number 1. You can discover more about Chad on Twitter at LED76Chad. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.